I'm not her. I'm Peter Guttridge. I'm the chair of this event. I'm delighted to be the chair of this event. Welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. In a moment, I'm going to bring on a woman who I guess you don't really need to be introduced to. She's a wonderful international bestseller. The new TV series is a massive hit. You've not had a chance. None of us have had a chance to see it yet. It's a big success in the US and Australia. Okay. The way this is going to go, we're going to have a chat for about half an hour. You're going to have a chance to ask questions for about half an hour, and then Diana's going to be signing copies of this book and many of the other books. She's here primarily to talk about this, but we're going to go all over the place. And then she'll be signing copies of the books in the bookshop. Please welcome Diana Gabaldon. Great to have you here. So,
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Tell us, without giving too much away, about this book, which we've waited some years to receive. It's well worth the wait, I hasten to add.
Yes, well, you can see from the size of it that it does take a while to write one of these. In addition to the complexity of the plot and the storyline, there's all the research that needs to be done for something that size. And a more important part of it is the internal engineering. As you can see, the books are very large. It does take me a while to write them. And consequently, when a new book comes out, people don't always realize that it is not a standalone book, but rather the 8th of a very long and large series. Consequently, I don't want people to be picking it up in the airport bookshop and saying, well, this will last me to Cleveland, only to be going, well, I have no idea what's going on here. So they have to be readable on their own. They're, of course, much richer, as you all know, if you're able to read them as a continuing series. But each one of them is very carefully designed so that it can be read as a standalone book. And that, as I say, takes quite a bit of time as well. I should also note that it takes quite a bit of time to come out and talk to people about books, which adds about another year to the interval between them. As I say to people who say, well, have you started writing the 9th book? When is the 9th book coming out? The answer to that is, if I weren't here talking to you, I'd be home writing it. But as it is, let us enjoy the afternoon, and you will just have to wait a little longer. Yeah. As to what this book is, it is, as Peter says, the 8th in the main Outlander books. There is a sort of a subset of books called the Lord John Grey novels, which we may address later. So overall, I've written 14 books, all told. This one takes up the story in 1778 in the summertime, finding our characters more or less in Philadelphia and on the verge of the Battle of Monmouth. Their personal situation, however, pales, or rather causes the Battle of Monmouth to pale. And we left them at the end of the last book, which ended on a brilliantly executed and conceived triple cliffhanger. As in, yes, I did do it on purpose. I did not, as some ill-natured souls suggested, merely walk away and leave the book. No, I did right where I meant it to. And where I meant it to was with Jamie Fraser, who had been presumed drowned, suddenly returning from the dead, as it were, to discover that his wife, Claire, had married his best friend, John. He was actually quite grateful to John for this. He had married her to keep her from being arrested as a rebel spy, which in fact she was. And of course, Jamie was not too disturbed at this, knowing quite well that John is homosexual, which was a capital offense in the 18th century and therefore kept very quiet. But Jamie knows about this because John, in fact, is in love with him, and he knows that too, but both of them ignore it. So much to his surprise, he has come to reclaim his wife, and thinking there's going to be no problem about this, but he's spotted on his way there and is pursued by a patrol of redcoat soldiers who pursue him into Lord John's house, where he finds Claire, and they have an ecstatic 30-second reunion. And then, he has to leave because he's being pursued. He bursts out into the hallway where Lord John has appeared, looking quite surprised, as one might expect. And the next thing that happens is that the leader of the redcoat patrol comes rushing up the stairs, and this leader proves to be Lieutenant Ransom, who is also the 9th Earl of Ellesmere, or so he thinks. Who he actually is Jamie Fraser's illegitimate son. A fact which becomes blindingly obvious to him when he comes nose to nose with his pater familias and notices just how familiar that familias is. As in they strongly resemble each other. And it's rather taken aback by this. So Lord John instantly Jamie takes Lord John hostage in order to escape from the house. And they absquatulate out the nearest window and down the rain pipe, and they're off. Well, as they're riding out of town, Lord John is, of course, in some turmoil of mind. He's really pleased to see Jamie back from the dead. At the same time, in paroxysms of grief and a lot of plum brandy, he and Claire slept together at the end of the last book. And so he's reasonably sure that Claire is going to tell Jamie this, and he thinks maybe he'd better get in first, out of noble motives, of course. He says, if there's going to be violence done, it's better he do it to me. And so as soon as they stop to water their horses, he blurts out, I have had carnal knowledge of your wife, which causes Jamie to look at him curiously and say, oh, why? So that's where we left the last book. So this book takes up there.
I'm exhausted.
And then we go on. Yeah. They're a hearty lot.
When you ended the last book, indeed, when you end each book, do you know where you're going to go with the next book then? Because you leave it.
Haven't a clue.
Not a clue at all.
No, unlike some other authors, I don't plan books out ahead of time, nor do I write with an outline, nor even in a straight line. I write in little bits and pieces where I can see things happening. And what I need on any given day to begin work is what I call a kernel. Vivid image, a line of dialogue, an emotional ambiance, anything I can sense concretely. And I'll write that down in a sentence or two, and then I sit there and look at it. I take words out, and I put them back, and I divide the sentence in two, and I put in more clauses, and I switch it back. And while I'm looking around, crafting this to be as euphonious and clear as possible, the back of my mind is kicking through the compost back there and kicking up mushrooms and questions and saying, well, what time of year is it? How is the light falling? Who am I looking at? Is the room cold? This sort of thing. And gradually I begin to get a sense of where I am, who might be there with me, and then someone else will say something else, and I begin to write the scene, and it flows it doesn't flow, it moves stickily from one bit to another, but I go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. The kernel is not usually what the scene is about, it's just my way of getting a foothold on the page. Sometimes it disappears entirely in the writing. But as we go along, that scene begins to grow in both directions. So by the time I have finished that scene to my satisfaction, I will have been through it literally hundreds of times. I don't rough draft and then rewrite. I just fiddle a lot as I go. So when I have done it, it's as good as I can make it, and then I will put it aside and go and look for another kernel somewhere else. Well, as I work, gradually these bits and pieces begin to accumulate. I'll write something and think, oh, that explains why this happened 4 months ago. So I'll put that over here, and then, oh, well, now I can see what has to fit in here. It's like playing Tetris in my head, but very slowly.
Well, how do you fit the research? Because you research superbly, and obviously these are very well-conceived books. But how do you kind of, at what stage are you getting that in? Have you done it all and it's all in your head, or are you needing to pop away and just check the
research. The research is done concurrently with the writing, because as I'm working on a scene, for instance, I will decide that I have to know which part of Philadelphia this took place in. Am I near enough to smell the river, for instance, because I have a very conscious river scent coming to me. I smell dead fish and mud and so forth. So I'm thinking, well, where am I? It's got to be somewhere, and so I pull up my 18th century map of Philadelphia and see which street was nearest the river and what buildings were on it in the 18th century, and I say, well, they can't be here because it's just warehouses, so they must be up here, by the Anabaptist meeting house. All right, who would be in an Anabaptist meeting house other than Anabaptists, of whom I have none in the story, so maybe I should have one, and so things like that. The research stimulates kernels for me, and again, the scenes generate questions that are answered by research. So there are the broader overview topics of research. For instance, the Battle of Monmouth, once I knew I was dealing with that, I got a copy of the Osprey Publications Men-at-Arms series, which are just the best if you want the order of battle and the details of the commanders and exactly what they were wearing at the time it's very, very detailed, and it has maps and photographs and things like that. So if that's what you're after, that's the best source. Yeah.
And in terms of all the characters you've got, do you keep charts and things and little timelines? And
I don't, yeah. No, I don't keep charts, timelines, or index cards. Everything is in my head, yeah.
Wow.
No, I am compiling the second volume of the Outlandish Companion, which with luck you'll get early in 2015 because it's almost done. But for that, the first companion had, and this one will have as well, a complete compiled, I suppose, is the cast of characters. Okay, now the first Outlandish Companion had over 500 characters. That covered the first 4 books. I think we are up to about 1,500 now because the second 4 books are longer. So that will take up a small chunk of the book.
And you don't secretly refer to that?
No, I don't, yeah. No, if I don't remember something, then it's not worth having the new book.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I don't want you to give away the ending, but am I assuming that at the end of this book there are certain cliffhangers again, which will carry us through to the next one?
Actually not. Let's see, this is not the last book. There is a book 9, as I said, but it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. I mean, there are a number of people who have called the ending a cliffhanger, but it's not. As in, you know exactly what happened, you just don't know how it happened, and that you may get explained in the next book. But no, it comes to a very satisfying conclusion. I haven't had any death threats at all on this one.
Did you really have death threats? I know you had people
once in a
with
while.
earlier books which were slightly
Well, it was
confused.
mostly with the second book, Dragonfly and Emperor. I had death threats at the end of that one. Yeah.
And that was obviously, you knew that would cause a shock.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No, I usually know what will cause a shock. My husband is the only person who reads what I'm writing while I'm writing it. When I finished a scene, to my satisfaction, I'll leave it on his sink at night. He gets up very early and I stay up very late, so I'll leave it for him and he'll take it off and read it over his coffee and come back and tell me what he thinks of it at lunch, often with entertaining marginal notes. Yes, his best marginal note was, "Nipples again." But every once in a while I'll give him a scene from a recent book and so forth. He'll read it and it will come out with the marginal note that says, "Oh, they're going to scream."
But as we speak, the Outlander TV series is in production.
It is
here.
Cumbernauld, just outside Glasgow.
Yeah, I think you went to a table reading, did you say, which is kind of rehearsal?
Yeah, this morning I was in Cumbernauld at what they call a table read, which is where we have a lot of tables in a square, and the cast of the various episodes sitting around them. They usually read 2 episodes at a time because that's what's in what they call a filming block. And so this morning we had the cast for episodes 15 and 16, which are the last 2 episodes from season 1. And I was very eager to see what happened in this particular table read, not only because it's a lot of fun, to hear the people read it. Some of them act and some of them just read. It's just so that the producers and writers can see what the flow is, and they'll be making notes. Like, "Oh, I've just seen this. Oh no, you can't do that. This person tripped over that line 3 times in a row. Maybe I better take it out." That sort of thing. But also because I actually had something to do with these particular scripts. It was very important, being the last part of the book, and they're the parts that deal with Wentworth Prison and what happened there. And, in the book, you don't actually...
Steady.
Well, in Outlander, beyond the first, nailing the hand to the table, you don't actually see what happens there. It's all told to you just in very short snapshots as Jamie tells it to Claire, and it's very synoptic. We leave most of it to your imagination because, frankly, the reader's imagination is much more powerful than anything anyone can write. So all you want to do is peek it a little and then stand back. But you can't do that on television, or not to such a large degree. You do actually have to show things. And as my husband said to me when I was writing Outlander, I was explaining this bit to him. I hadn't written it yet. And I said, but it's all right. I'm not going to show most of that. So we don't need to go into gross detail about what happened in that room. He looked at me very seriously. He knows me. And he says, "But you had to know everything that happened in that room, didn't you?" And I said, "Well, that's right. I do. Yeah. And I do." So I told them. Yeah, they were shocked. No, actually, one of the writers of those episodes, after we'd read through it and so forth, I told him, good job. I like what you've done here. We had been consulting with them for a month or more on these things. And anyway, he had done something rather nasty to a servant. And he said, well, since you are Blackjack Randall, tell me, would Randall have been nicer to this person? And I said, no, he wouldn't. Said, this man's a tool, once he served his purpose. He rather looked at me, and I said, if I had not been born with a conscience and a sense of empathy, I'd be a very dangerous person.
I think I believe you.
Oh, you ought.
So how does it feel after all these years for Outlander to be on the telly? It's been a long time coming, I guess.
Oh, it has, yeah.
I presume it was optioned quite quickly for film, maybe?
Yes, it was, yeah. Well, I should explain how options work. Film options, a production company will come and offer you a modest amount of money for an option. And what that is, essentially, is just a period of time. It's a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever you agree on, during which they have the exclusive right to try to put together the funding and the casting and so forth in order to make a motion picture, or in this case, a TV show. If they can accomplish that, and it's much harder than it sounds to put together $60 million to make a movie, then they, by the terms of the contract, they will then buy the film rights for a somewhat larger sum, and after that they own them forever, in perpetuity, throughout the universe. This is actually what it says in their language. First time I saw a film contract, I said to my agent, they're joking, aren't they? And he said, oh no, they mean it. So you want to be very careful who you do options with, because while the odds are 999 to 1 against them putting together a deal, it does happen. So you want to be dealing with people who you more or less trust to be able to do something with your work, insofar as it is possible to use the word trust in the same sentence with filmmaker. As in not often. Yeah, so consequently, we've only optioned the rights to the books 4 times since the first was published in 1991.
But did you ever believe that it was actually filmable without losing so much it was not really worth it?
Actually, no, having seen several attempts. I mean, I've seen scripts written by people who were trying to make a 2-hour movie of it. And as I told Ron Moore when he showed me his pilot script for the first episode, I said, this is the first thing based on my work that I've ever seen that didn't make me either turn white or burst into flame. And I mean, it is dead flat impossible to make a 2-hour movie out of that book and have it resemble the original story in any way.
So at what stage did TV come into the picture, which made it a much more likely thing?
Well, this is a rather long story and maybe somewhat boring. But essentially, the 4th option holder, who also wanted to make a 2-hour film, and had engaged several very reputable screenwriters whose names you would recognize if I were indiscreet enough to speak them aloud, but reinforced my opinion that it's dead flat impossible. Anyway, he was a very stubborn man, and he kept renewing the option. Well, while he was doing this, Ron D. Moore, who is he's been a television showrunner for a long time. He did all of Battlestar Galactica and his new invention. He worked on Star Trek and Star Trek New Generations earlier. Very good storyteller, very talented, but television is his milieu. And after finishing Battlestar Galactica, he told me, he was having dinner with his wife and his production partner and talking over possible future projects. And one of them said, well, there's this book called Outlander, which is really great. And the other woman piped up and said, Outlander, you've read Outlander? And they started doing what Outlander fans do when they meet each other. And as Ron said, I was just sitting there drinking my martini and going like this. And finally, he said, well, does one of you have a copy of this book? And they both reached in their bags and pulled one out. So he took it home and read it all in one night. And he said, this is great. He said, this is a wonderful story. It's got everything I like, in terms of story. And I can see how to make a TV show out of this. So he went to find out who had the rights. And it was Jim Kohlberg, our option holder. Well, Jim said, no, I don't want to do television. I want to make a 2-hour film. And so Ron said, well, we'll check back with you. So once a year for the next 3 or 4 years, his partner would call up Jim and say, well, how's that feature film working out for you, Jim? And he kept saying, oh, it's coming. And then finally, on the last try, he said, well, I begin to think you may be right. It might be a television show. So at this point, Ron took it to the Sony Corporation, where he had a production deal in place, meaning that they had agreed to let him produce a television show of his own choosing, provided they approved of it. And so he took it to them, they approved of it, and the result was this really odd pentangular contract between Sony, Ron, Jim, me, and Starz, which is another American corporation. And I should explain here how this works. Starz is the production company, meaning that it is their job actually to make the show, which they're doing in Scotland, but they are an American company. Therefore, they have only the American rights to show that. They can only show it in the US. All the other rights belong to the Sony Corporation, which then makes individual licensing deals with different countries. And so far, they've made deals with at least 15 different countries, France, Italy, Germany, Spain, the Middle East, all of Scandinavia, and a number that I don't remember. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, those kinds.
But not
with the UK, no.
Not Scotland or England or Great Britain.
Yeah, I think at the moment, at least, it would still be the UK. After.
Just careful there.
Yes, we'll have to see. Yeah, well, there's a lot of talk and speculation as to why the show has not been sold to the UK as yet, and it's certainly not that Sony doesn't want to sell it to them, because, why would they not want to sell it to everybody? And they are, in fact, negotiating with one or more UK TV suppliers. Now, why that deal has not come to conclusion, I don't know. They've been at it for 3 months at least. But, there's public talk and rumor and speculation, since there is absolutely no evidence on which to speculate. The most common rumor is that, they're holding off till after the Scottish referendum. Okay, but as far as I know, there's no evidence whatever to suggest that that's true. But that's the most common rumor. Now you take that for what it's worth.
So the first series is 16 episodes.
It is, yeah, amazing.
I read that after the first pilot episode, which came out a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, that they immediately commissioned the second series, which seems to me unheard of after a pilot.
Well, it's quite rare, I expect. But the first episode, which was shown in the US on the 9th of August.
Don't rub it in.
Yeah. You wouldn't get it till the end of September anyway. No, the first episode in the US had 5 million viewers. Game of Thrones had 500,000. For its first episode, I should say. Game of Thrones is now quite a bit higher than that, but we have heights to aim for. Yeah, and in fact, Ron told me today at the table read that episode 2, which aired on Saturday night, had a 25% increase in viewership. And,
Fantastic. Fantastic.
So that may have stimulated stars to.
And you're presumably hoping that each series, assuming there are enough, will take a book.
Roughly speaking, yeah. I don't know what we'll do when we hit the third book, which is noticeably longer and has a more convoluted plot. But as Ron said, in respect to that question, he said I should have such problems. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It's possible that they would, at that point, begin letting part of a book lap over into the next series and combine it with part of the sequential book. And at that point, not be doing the one-to-one congruence of season to book.
And has Lord John been optioned as well, or will that get too confusing, the Lord John novels?
Lord John is a slightly murky proposition, and no one's been touching it as yet in terms of film. I would love to see it as a television drama. It's got the same sorts of plot lines that lend themselves to a TV adaptation. It's got that sort of character and all that. The murkiness comes in with character, as in the Sony Corporation at this moment owns my characters insofar as their filmic representation may be. Okay, how far does my characters go? Because while the contract is only for the books of the Outlander series, and it's predicated on my writing further books as well, it doesn't mention any of the Lord John Grey books. At the same time, there are inarguably characters from the main books who appear in the Lord John Grey books. So you'd have to have some sort of contractual arrangement for doing that, if and when, but nobody's crossing that bridge yet.
Yeah. I assume you're pleased with the actors who were relatively unknown.
Oh, yes, no, I'm thrilled with the actors.
And you preferred the fact that they were relatively
Oh, yes,
unknown.
no, I was relieved that they were unknown, because, well-known actors come with baggage. I had a lot of people saying, I want Chris Hemsworth to be Thor. And I said, well, putting aside the nose, which isn't Jamie Fraser at all, I said, no one would ever be able to look at him without thinking Thor, and wanting to. And besides, he's an Australian. He can't do a Scottish accent to save his life. No, I wanted a Scottish actor if humanly possible, and luckily it was. I found Sam Ewan, who was born in Dumfries, New Galloway. And and I'm going down to do a signing in Wigtown on Wednesday, and as I told him that, he said, that's where I was born. It'd be very nice. Yeah, no, one of the production assistants likes to wind him up by saying, well, you're not a real Scot, You come down from down there, she's a Highlander, so.
You're losing a few in the audience now, you'd be aware of that.
These are not my words. No, he sounds pretty Scottish to me.
And are you involved in the scripting at all, or you've chosen not to be?
No, I am, actually. By the contract, I am a consultant, but that's a word that can mean anything or nothing. If they think you're a nuisance, it will mean nothing. But they'll pay you, but they don't want you anywhere near the production. As it is, I know how not to be a nuisance. And they show me scripts, and they show me footage, the daily footage, and they show me the episodes as they're put together, roughly edited. And, and I'm welcome to make comments, so I'm very diplomatic about how I offer my comments, or I have been up until this point. And, I usually will only say something if I think it's really wrong or there's a historical problem. There was one script in which they had Claire wandering away from the rent party and falling in with a group of Scottish housewives, and one of them had seen her eyeing a vase in the window. Mind you, this is remote Highland village in the 18th century, and I'm saying vase in the window, yeah, just vaguely possible. Probably her son brought it back from Africa. But the housewife invites her in, and we find her playing cards with the ladies over tea. I'm thinking remote Highland village, 18th century. Let's see, tea, no, cards, no. And so I said as much. And I said, it's all right to have her fall in with the women and so forth, but what they would really be doing is chores. Everybody worked on to dusk on a Highland farm. They would be milking the goats, or better yet, walking wool, which is where you lay out the freshly woven wool, you souse it with boiling hot urine, and then you mash it back and forth with your hands. This being rather tedious, they tended to do it in groups with several women on each side of a table, and they sang walking songs to pass the time while they did this. And so the producers very obligingly went to the Aviemore Highland Folklore Museum and got a number of people who could actually sing walking songs, and they filmed Claire doing just that. So I was very pleased.
Can I switch now and take you back to your childhood? Were you always writing as a child? Was it always an ambition of yours?
Well, I've known since I was about 8 years old that I was meant to be a writer, to write novels. I didn't write down anything when I was young, but I told stories all the time with my younger sister. We shared a bedroom till I was 14. And we would tell these long, convoluted stories, late into night, taking several rolls each. And, I knew that I could, kind of see the other side as it was. Things would just come to me. But I had no idea how to actually write a book. I just knew that I was meant to do that.
And were books part? Your dad was a state senator, I think, for
a long time.
My
dad was a politician.
Were books in your family a lot?
Yes, they were. Yeah, it was a very bookish family. Yeah, mostly on my mother's side, though my dad did read. He read mostly, political biographies and magazines and newspapers. But yeah, the house was full of books. But my dad was very conservative. He would say to me when I was young, "You're such a poor judge of character, you're bound to marry some bum," he said. So be sure you get a good education so you can support your family.
Which you then did.
Which I then did,
you did zoology and you did a whole range of things, and then you were a professor.
Yeah, I was. I went into science. I have a PhD in quantitative behavioral ecology, which is just animal behavior with statistics. Don't worry about it.
I'm glad you said that, yeah.
Yeah.
And were you writing then, or again, it was just in your head, or
no,
it wasn't even in your
there
head?
were just bits and pieces in my head. I had no coherent vision of a book or even a particular story. I just knew I was meant to be a novelist. Well, when I was 35, I thought to myself, Mozart was dead at 36. Maybe we'd better get a move on just in case. And so I said, fine, on my next birthday, I'm going to begin writing a novel, just to find out how. Because to this point, I had written all kinds of everything, anything anyone would pay me for. Because while I did not marry a bum, I married a very nice man, whom I still have 42 years later. But he quit work 3 months after our first child was born in order to start his own business. And I do have to say that in terms of financial stability, there's not that much to choose between an entrepreneur and a bum. So I was our sole support for several years, and they don't pay assistant professors all that much. So I was looking for ways and means of earning extra money without taking up prostitution in the home. And, I tell young writers at writers' workshops, I say, you know what the world's oldest profession is? Well, we have the world's second oldest profession. Said, now we have it all over the world's oldest profession in that if you're a writer, you can do it to a lot of people at once.
Well, you were right. This is a good segue. But you were writing comics at the time, weren't you? Which doesn't really link with prostitution.
Yeah.
But for Walt Disney, what kind of comics were they?
Walt Disney wrote for them for about 3 years. I wrote Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge and Three Little Pigs and the Big Bad Wolf, though those tended to be rather formulaic.
How did you get that? Was that because of zoology? No, surely not.
No, it comes from the bookish family. My mother taught me to read when I was about 3, in part by reading me Walt Disney comic books, and I never stopped. So I was 27 and reading one I'd picked up at the convenience store. And I said, well, this is pretty bad. I bet I could do better myself. So I found out the name and address of the editor who did that line of comics, and I wrote him this very rude letter saying, dear sir, I've been reading your comics for 25 years. They've been getting worse and worse. I said, I'm not sure I could do better myself, but I'd like to try. Well, luckily I'd hit to Del Connell, a gent with a sense of humor, and he wrote back and said, okay, try. And he showed me the format, how to lay out a script in panel form and all that. So I wrote him a story. He didn't buy it, but he did something much more valuable. He told me what was wrong with it. He did buy my second story, and as I say, I continued to write for Disney, both the domestic and the foreign program, for about 3 years. At this point, the powers that be at Disney said we had 40 years of Carl Barks scripts in our files. Why are we buying new ones? So they stopped buying new ones.
Oh, really?
That was the end of my comic career.
But was that really useful for you in terms of structuring books, or not at all? Was it a different discipline?
It's really quite different. Now, where it was valuable was in terms of evaluating scripts, in that a script moves in visual imagery. In a book, you have much more control over your pacing because you can do internal monologue, you can describe things at length or briefly, you can summarize things in a half sentence or whatever you like. You actually control the reader's pace. Even those of you who are inclined to skip, you don't know it, but you're being controlled. And in fact, my son is a novelist himself. He writes epic science fiction. His name is Sam Sykes, for anyone who wants to look him up.
You've co-written a story with him,
yeah,
as well.
Yeah, but I told him, as we like to discuss writing periodically, he's never read my books because, as my eldest daughter said, I don't want to read sex scenes written by my mother. Yes, now, mind you, when we premiered the show, the first episode had its premiere at the San Diego Comic-Con, where Sam was in his own right as a novelist. And my eldest daughter and her husband came down also for the premiere as part of their wedding anniversary weekend. So Sam and Laura were sitting next to me watching this show. We had these two enormous bodyguards with the group. I mean, they were, no kidding, 7'2" and 7'3" and about 400 pounds each. They were just immense. So I'm sitting next to Sam, who's telling me something funny that had happened at the show. Sam himself is 6'5" and no shrinking violet, but anyway, he was making his characteristic faces and gesturing wildly. It runs in the family. And one of the bodyguards was instantly at my shoulder, and he bent down and said, now, if you feel threatened at any moment, ma'am, just raise your hand. And I said, no, it's all right, I know him. But anyway, after the episode, both the kids tweeted me and said, oh, great show, Mom, which Sam had another one, and he said, watching sex scenes written by your mother? Awkward. So I pointed out to him, I didn't actually write those. It's not that they weren't in the book, I just didn't write them.
I mean, it is fairly close to the book, isn't it?
It does, yes, it's a wonderful adaptation. Yeah. The thing is that a book has its own internal structure, and television has its internal structure. It has to be divisible into episodes, each of which has its own satisfying dramatic arc. So you get all these little arcs which build up into the whole story, whereas in a book you can just take off and go like this and like this. So consequently, they have had to move some of the scenes out of their original sequence and move them into another place where they can support the dramatic arc of that episode. And of course, when you start moving things around, it introduces, sort of Rubik's Cube complexity. And so then they will add another little emendation or loop, which was not in the books, but is entirely congruent with what's in the books. As Ron said, it's something that could have been in the books, or it's something that obviously was in the books, but it wasn't on the page, that sort of thing. And so, the feeling is not one of dislocation, but it does give you this delightful feeling of seeing the original story, but not knowing what's going to happen next. So I would watch them with great anticipation when they put an episode together, and I'm thinking, wow, yeah, this is very cool. So it's a great discovery for me as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've got loads more questions, but you've been very patient with me, and I think it's only fair to let the audience get some questions in. So thank you for that. Let's get some questions from the audience. Second row here, wait for the microphone. I'll try and reach all of you if I can. If someone could put a microphone in that lady with the red jumper there for the next question, and keep them succinct, if you would.
All right.
Sadly, Tom Bird has disappeared from the series at the moment. I know you don't plan your characters, but does he do something like become a butler or similar?
Actually, if you read that book, you'll find out.
I like it. Who's there, yeah?
So one of the things with your books is that you've got kind of a lot of limitations with creating your own world and your own timelines and everything. Have there ever been limitations that you wrote in the earlier books that you felt constrained by later, and how did you handle that?
Oh, not really. I was actually having breakfast with George R.R. Martin at one point a couple of years ago and talking about current things, and he was saying he was somewhat stuck with where he was because he'd done something in an earlier book. He'd killed someone he didn't really want dead, or that he could use now, but he didn't know how to get himself out of this corner. And I said, well, it's easy, George. Just back out and come in with a different character. I mean, no, I've never found it a limitation, really. It's just a challenge. How are you going to get out of this one? And in fact, often I will create situations that appear to have no way out just to see what can be done. Yeah.
There?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
You chose to focus on the Quaker connection
In this book, yeah.
as opposed to the Anabaptist connection or something like
There's
that.
not many Anabaptists left, whereas there are still a few Quakers around.
Was that a conscious decision that this was a group of people you wanted to bring your focus to?
Well, it was partly a function of place in that the story was set in Philadelphia, and the Quakers were a very important force in Philadelphia in the 18th century and in the American Revolution. And this is the other thing. While the books are superficially, very adventurous and genre bending and will keep people reading, certainly, there are actually deeper themes going on in them. And one of those is the nature of war. And what better to be the backdrop for a controversy on the nature of war than to have important characters who are Quakers.
Okay, thank you. Gentleman there.
Thank you. Diana, I'm a mere novice regarding your books. I'm only on the second one.
Hey, take your time, I'm not fast.
How do you feel now that your series of books and this television series, the impact it's going to have on Scottish tourism?
Oh, well, I'm really pleased about that. I'm extremely fond of Scotland and really, really happy that other people are now able to share it with me. And I'm sure there's much more to it than just my books, but I'm happy about that. In fact, I'm having dinner with the Visit Scotland people tonight. Yes, and,
Okay, there's somebody there, but someone over here want a question as well, so I can get that microphone up there?
Who's got the
No, okay.
microphone?
Okay, we'll stay with you, and then we'll go up to the back.
There you are.
Diana, why do I have cross-stitch and you have Outlander?
Well, because Cross Stitch was the working title for that book when I was writing it. It's not a particularly good title, it's just what I called the manuscript, which I was never planning to show anyone or try to get published. But things happened, and we did get published, but in the US. And they said, well, cross stitch sounds rather like embroidery. Can you think of something more adventuresome? And so eventually I thought of Outlander, and they liked that. I wanted to call it Sassenach, and they said, no one can pronounce your name, and if we have a title they can't pronounce either. so Outlander it was. And then 6 months later, we sold it to the UK. And they said, well, we love the book, but we can't call it Outlander, because to us, an Outlander is someone from South Africa. And can you think of anything else? I said, well, originally I called it Cross Stitch. And they said, oh, lovely. And so it was Cross Stitch. Well, I have had not a few letters over the years from UK readers saying, there's this funny story about how I found your first book. I was browsing in the handicraft section of my bookstore.
Well, this is called Moby as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's my shorthand. It's a very long title written in my own heart's blood. An echo in the bone, you can shorten to echo, but you can't go around calling a book written. It doesn't flow. So anyway, it's an abbreviation of my own heart's blood, M-O-H-B, Moby. Also, it's big and white.
That's true. Lady over there, take that microphone there, and then over there.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned George R.R. Martin.
Yeah.
Was he able to give you any advice when you were optioning Outlander to TV, or shared any experiences with Game of Thrones and everything?
Oh, was George able to offer any helpful advice when optioning the show? Actually, no. I had been optioning my books actually before he began writing his, so I know a bit about it. We do talk about the television production since he's now got one, and so have I, and so we are actually the only people in this particular position at the moment, I think, since Charlene Harris has completed her series and moved out. There's probably a few others in production. But just a little, well, actually he said, how many episodes are you getting? And I said 16, to which he replied, what? They only give me 10. It's that kind of thing, yeah.
But he lives in Santa Fe, and you've got a house in Santa Fe. Is there something in the water there or anything that,
There's a lot of writers who live in Santa Fe. It's a very quiet, laid-back sort of town. It aids contemplation. Yeah, but George has lived there for a long time, yes. 25 years, I think. Yeah. My husband and I have a small place in Santa Fe because we found ourselves visiting there 3 or 4 times a year to go to the opera or art galleries. And finally we said, well, why don't we just buy a small place, and not have to pay hotel bills. So to get the most of it, we live there for a week out of every month, but it tends to be a different week every month.
Right, there's somebody there, yeah?
Hello, Diana. At which point did you know how long the books were going to be, as in the number of books? When you started off, did you always plan it would be 8, 9 books, or
No.
did you think 1 or 2 and it just carried on?
No, as I said in the beginning, I don't plan books out and I don't outline them either. I wait for the book to show me the shape of it. I think in geometric shapes, and as I put together the pieces of a book, it will assume a specific shape for me. And in fact, if any of you, well, actually wouldn't because it's the UK, there's a 20th anniversary Outlander, which has an essay in the back called The Shape of Things, which discusses the shapes of all the books. But I will put that in the new Outlandish Companion as well. But yeah, no, the overall series has a shape to it as well, which is gradually filling in. And when that shape is complete, then the story will be done. But I'll have to wait for the books to tell me that. Yeah.
Okay. There's somebody up there, and then take that microphone down there, and then we'll come to you.
Hi. Did you have a say in the actors who've been chosen to play Claire and Jamie in the television series? Are you happy with who is actually playing them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually can't see you. So
She's right at the back there, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, there you are. Great,
did you have a say in the casting?
Yes.
And are you pleased?
Not a say as such, or I mean, not a legal say, but Ron and his partner Meryl have been very kind about including me in the production details. And so they sent me the audition tapes, both for Sam Heughan and for Katrina Balfe. And they actually called me to tell me they'd found Jamie right away. He was the first person they cast, and everyone was terribly surprised because they were thinking, oh, he'll be just impossible to cast, you know, we'll never find him and it will be the UPS man in the end. But so I was amazed myself, and they called me not a week later to say, we found Jamie. And I said, are you sure? They said, oh yes, you know, we just looked at him and said, yeah, there he is, that's him. And so we're sending you the audition tapes. And I said, well, great, you know, I'm in Flagstaff, Arizona on my way to Santa Fe. I can't look at it till tonight, but you know, what's his name? So they told me, and I began Googling him as we were driving along. Well, I got his IMDb page, the International Movie Database, and it had, you know, still photos from some of his earlier work. Well, now Sam's a very chameleonic actor. He looks totally different in every role I've ever seen him in. And none of his photos actually do him justice, as in he doesn't really look like them. So I was looking at it and thinking, this man is grotesque. What are you thinking? But we got to there, and I keyed up my computer, and I was looking through my fingers because I wasn't expecting much. 5 seconds in, I said, well, he looks great. He doesn't look anything like his photos. 5 seconds more, he was gone, and it was just Jamie Fraser right there. I've never been so astonished. It was just great, yeah. And, you know, very much the same with Katrina. They had flown Sam out to test with an endless stream of British actors or actresses. And as they all said, you know, these are wonderful actresses, but they just don't have that Claire thing about them. And Katrina did. And, you know, it was the same. They just, there she is. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so we got very, very lucky with the casting. But in fact, all of the casting has been just spot on. Yeah.
Right. Okay, somebody there?
Yeah.
Diana, my
Put the microphone near your mic.
Diana, my friend and I have travelled up from Dumfries today. We actually
Yeah.
live in Dumfries and Galloway, where New Galloway is just along the road from us.
Very good.
And I wondered if you have any Scottish ancestry that you write so well about your characters from Scotland.
No, I have not, unfortunately. But I appreciate the compliment. A woman at the dinner last night who was quite intoxicated at the time, so in vino veritas, sat down next to me and she said, you know, you've got the true Scottishness in you. She said, I have no idea how you came by it, but you've got it. No, when I decided on a whim to set the books in Scotland, I immediately began researching Scotland. And then amongst the factual stuff, what I did was to find anything I could that was written by a Scot, because that's how you pick up not only the language, but the mode of thought. And I listened to all of the folklore and the ballads and the songs and so forth, because that's how you find out what's important to people.
Okay, lady over there. Yep.
Hello, Diana. Welcome to Edinburgh.
Thank you.
And it's lovely to be in the same room as you.
Oh, thank you.
And not a question, but just a word of appreciation, because at school I absolutely hated history. I wasn't interested in battles and fighting and all the dates you had to learn. But single-handedly, you have made me understand Scottish history. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you very much.
At the back there.
Yeah.
Can you put your hand up again over there? The person who put their hands up earlier, they were waving? Oh, they've changed their minds.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the person at the back there, and then there's a lady in black over there, and then there's that lady there, and there was somebody else just at the back there.
Okay.
So,
All right.
lady at the back there.
Standing up at the back, which is very convenient. Yeah.
Without wishing to issue any death threats, I do struggle with the multiple strands in the later books. you could have made the Brie and Roger 20th century story stand alone, and you obviously had reasons not to. Help me out here.
Well, it is segregated. There's 5 sections of that book. Well, actually, the middle one has 3 sections in it, but actually there's 9 altogether. But yeah, anyway, 2 of them are Brianna and Roger's sections. They're segregated by themselves. So, you know, if you only want to read that story, only read those 2 sections. You know, if you have trouble, you know, switching from one frame of reference to another, which is understandable, it's not that hard to, you know, just follow one character throughout if you like. Flip the pages till you see his name and carry on. Yeah. But yes, I have very sound structural reasons for doing that.
The lady at the back, and if you can get that to that lady with the glasses and the black top, just stick your hand up again if you would. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there you go.
Lady at the back.
I'm making my first trip here from America.
Lovely.
And just happened to come upon you today. And I've been a fan for 20 years.
Wonderful.
And I was wondering how much traveling you've done through Scotland since writing the books.
Any amount. I wrote the first book entirely from library research because I was not intending to publish it or show it to anyone, including my husband. So I couldn't very well announce that I had to go and do research in Scotland for several months and abandon him with 3 small children. That book, as I say, got published through a series of events that I won't go into here. But they did give me a 3-book contract. And so I said to my husband, well, I think I really must go and see Scotland. So we did. We rented a car and drove up the coast from London and spent 2 weeks roaming around the Highlands, looking at everything and acquiring all the books I could afford or get my hands on the way. So yeah, it was great. And I've been back at every opportunity since. This is probably my 23rd, 24th trip today.
That lady there, and then take the microphone 2 rows back. Lady there.
Hi, Diana.
Hi.
I wondered, the books are very, the principal characters in the books are very physical, you know, like sort of both sexually and, you know, like sort of, and just physically active. You know, how do you feel you're going to deal with them aging even further than they are already? Because obviously they live in historical time, which is fairly perilous, and you know, like sort of, you know, they also live in real time. So, you know.
Yeah, well, it was rather perilous in the 18th century, but the chief risk was of disease. Jamie has reached the age at which he really can't be compelled to serve in the army anymore. So war is probably not going to get him if he's careful, which he isn't. But and he has Claire, you know, who is reasonably good about disease and things like that. In fact, a great number of people did live into their 80s and 90s in the 18th century. Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams all lived to the age of 84 and were in reasonably good shape when they did so. So, you know, I'm not going to worry about it until we get there. There's the answer.
This lady here, and I hope that, if you can tell that just 2 rows back. Yeah, you got it, yeah. This lady here.
Hi, I was just wondering if we can expect any more short stories, because there's been a few that are associated with the series part of the book.
Yeah, no, my husband calls those novellas and things pilot fish because they sort of swim around amongst the larger stories and support bits and pieces. Yeah, I'm sure there will be more of those, since now I've kind of got the knack of writing something less than 300,000 words.
Yeah, your short stories aren't really. Your short stories aren't really short, are they? Didn't your first Lord John novel?
Yeah, well, the first Lord John novel was written as a short story, you know, Private Matter. I'd written an actual short story of 15,000 words for an anthology of historical crime. And, you know, that went well, and people said, oh, this is great, you know, can you write another one? And I said, yeah, why not? And so in the interstices of 2 novels, I began writing the second Lord John story. I was picking away at it with one hand and picking up the threads of my novel with the other. So I was going along. 6 months later, I stopped in New York to have lunch with my 2 agents on my way to the UK. And they said, what are you working on? And I said, oh, I've just about finished the second Lord John story. And they said, oh, that's great. How long is this one? And I said, well, I knew you'd ask, so I checked last night. It's 85,000 words. I think I maybe need 5 more to finish it. They looked at each other, and they looked at me and said, that's the size the normal books are. And I said, well, I thought it was a short story. And they said, well, it's not. So they took it away and sold it. And that's why Private Matter is perhaps a little less complex than my other novels, is because I wrote it as a short story.
Whoever's got the microphone there, go. See.
Hi, I'm really lucky in that I live in Doune, so I got to glimpse a little bit of the filming at Castle.
Oh, yes,
which was fantastic. I lived very close, so I saw the horses go past every morning and got to glimpse the actors. But last night I was on the internet on Visit Scotland's website, and they have a map of Outlander, and you can click on the castle and you can see all of the wonderful castles in Scotland, apart from Doune Castle. And I was wondering if you could perhaps have a word with them tonight.
Well, I certainly will. Yes, I certainly will. I was actually wondering what I was going to talk to them about over dinner. It'll make a good opening subject. Thank you.
Okay, gentleman there, if you can bring that microphone right round here.
Yeah.
But gentleman there.
Hi, I'm a fluent Gaelic speaker and Gaelic's my first language, and with the books there's great exposure for the language, and thank you for that.
It's
and
my
also,
pleasure.
could you just tell us how you came to know the language and where you got the words from?
About the Gaelic, yeah. Well, I don't actually know much Gaelic myself. I've got 3 bits that I can write in people's books, you know, and I can say Merry Christmas, that's about it. But I knew from my research that Gaelic was, you know, the tongue of the Highlanders at the time. You know, this was what would be commonly spoken. And therefore, I wanted it to be as realistic and accurate as possible. At the same time, I didn't speak Gaelic, and my time traveler, of course, would not understand it. So what I did was to, you know, say that people were speaking in Gaelic, and she'd be deducing what they meant from their gestures and body language. And yeah, I would add occasional phrases. I went and got a Gaelic English dictionary, which was not easy to find in Phoenix, Arizona in 1988, I'll tell you. I had to send to Boston to some place called Steinhoff's Foreign Books for it. But when I called up and said I want a Gaelic English dictionary, and they said, oh, Scottish Gaelic or Irish Gaelic? And I said, you're the place. Yes, I want Scottish. Yeah, so anyway, I used that for Outlander. And then, as I say, we went to Scotland while I was writing Dragonfly and Amber, and I got a much bigger and more comprehensive Gaelic English dictionary. I was able to include more Gaelic. And then I got this lovely letter from a gentleman named Ian McKinnon Taylor. And he said, you know, I've been reading your books. They're fabulous. It's so nice to see Scottish history portrayed so accurately and honestly. He said, there is just this one thing I hesitate to mention. I am a native Gaelic speaker from the Isle of Harris, he said, and I think you must be getting your Gaelic from a dictionary. He said, it's not so much that you're using the wrong words, but you're not using them grammatically or idiomatically the way that a native speaker would. And he said, can I offer you my assistance? So I said, where have you been all my life, Mr. Taylor? And so Ian helped me with the Gaelic translations up through Fiery Cross. And then he got ill and wasn't able to put in that much effort anymore. And at the moment, my Gaelic is being provided for me by Catherine Ann McPhee, whom some of you will know as a Gaelic presenter and singer of some note, and her friend Catherine McGregor, who is Canadian and modestly styles herself as a Gaelic learner, meaning that she actually knows what all the little diacritical bits mean and why they're there. So between the two of them, I get very sophisticated Gaelic, though I'm told by an Inverness audience that it is with a Barra accent.
Thank you. Lady there.
I was on the internet one day and I noticed a couple of people discussing the fact that, well, all these novels and films and dramas like Game of Thrones that have got rape in them, well, that's realistic, but nobody ever has smallpox or childbirth. That's realism too. You don't have smallpox, you don't have childbirth, you don't have broken legs, you don't have people with one leg. And I thought, 1, 2, 3, and they were saying, this Diana Gabaldon stuff, this is never going to work, it won't be realistic. And I thought, broken legs, smallpox, check, measles, check. You know,
childbirth, you know, right, left, and sideways. Yeah.
So the way that you managed to, integrate things that other authors just don't touch with a 10-foot barge pole, like you even had a minor character with cerebral palsy many, many books back. What is it? Is it just the old go slow and pay attention that leads you to keep this all? Yes.
Well, there's some of that about it. No, what it is it's a very sound principle, which actually Ron Moore articulated with regard to Battlestar Galactica, so I know he shared it, but I've been doing it for a long time. It's that this is how you make people believe things, is by providing a picture of daily life that is so recognizable to them that they feel as though they sink into it. And, you know, you make it interesting. We have Claire, who has the medical, you know, focus on what's happening, so we actually care, you know, what she's going to do about this person's broken leg or how she's going to diagnose this condition or whatever. But it is something that the readers relate to completely. They recognize it. They feel familiar. They feel at home. If you make people believe in the backdrop of the story, they will follow you when you jump off a cliff and tell them it's time travel. They will. Yeah.
Lady there, and then across to there.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you're hearing Roger's voice these days.
How am I hearing Roger's voice these days? Oh, I know what you mean, yeah.
How is it sounding to you?
Oh, I know what you mean. You'll find out in the next book. She wants to know if he's got his voice back. Yeah.
Just the lady just next to you there. Just next to you, yeah.
Yeah,
and
okay.
you.
Okay.
Hi, Diana.
Hi.
I noticed on the internet there's a rumour that the guy who actually started you off writing the series, Fraser Hines in the Doctor Who series, is rumoured to be coming onto Outlander. First of all, A, is that true? And B, how excited are you if it is true?
Yeah. Oh, it's entirely true. I saw him at the table read today, and in fact, he... No, in fact, he insisted on taking a photo with me and Sam Hewen, so I had Jamie's on either side. And he was proposing to post it quite soon, so you may find it on the internet tonight, for all I know. But yes, he does have quite a nice role. It's more than a cameo. He's got an actual role with lines and all that, and he'll do a great job of it. Yeah. But it was lovely to see him again. I first met him in the flesh in 2009 when I came for that gathering, and he was at that as well. But we've been in contact, over the years, just sporadically. But yeah, lovely guy. So I'm really pleased that he's got in. What? What's that? Oh, what's the character?
What's the character?
I don't see why you shouldn't know. It's Sir Fletcher Gordon, the governor of Wentworth Prison. Well, now, mind you, Sir Fletcher has no idea what's going on down in the dungeon.
That lady there, and then take the microphone up to that.
Yeah.
Hello, Diana. I just wondered, we were talking earlier about the threads running through the latest book.
Yeah.
Was it a conscious decision on your part to dedicate quite so many segments to Lord John, in an almost independent of Claire and Jamie and other things that were happening?
It was just the time at which he would naturally have impinged on this story. I mean, the Battle of Monmouth was between the rebels and the British Army. His brother is with the British Army, and if they were there, obviously Lord John would have been fighting with it. But it was largely a result of one of my cliffhangers at the end of the last book, where you saw Lord John receive a missive just before Jamie showed up, and in the shock of his arrival, he shoved it in his pocket unread. Well, at that point, Lord John is retired from the army. He's a diplomat and so forth. In this book, we discover that his brother has arrived unexpectedly, and since his regiment is now about to march and join the British Army, he wants his brother back as his lieutenant colonel, and has thus, reinstituted him in his usual high-handed way, and just sent him a note saying you're back on the job, and enclosing his warrant of commission. So of course Lord John has this in his pocket when he and Jamie Fraser run into a bunch of militiamen, which, as he's wearing common clothes and so forth, this makes him a spy. They could hang him on the spot, and they very nearly do. It was just sort of, one thing leads to another. When I had him put the missive in his pocket, I didn't know what was on it.
Okay, I'm going to try and fit in this final three. There's somebody there, and there's somebody over there, and there was somebody in the middle there somewhere. Yes, up there.
Hi,
so,
hello.
yes.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, 4. I'll try and fit 4.
Just to say thank you for mentioning Wigtown, and we're really looking forward to seeing you down there.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you for being so quick. Yes, lady there.
Hi, Diana. I'm just wondering, what was, if you can remember, what was the first character or the first scene you ever thought of when you started to write it?
Well, all I had in mind was the vision of a man in a kilt, which is, of course, a very powerful and compelling image. Yeah, it was not so much that Fraser Hines' character from Doctor Who inspired the book or Jamie. It was that I saw him in a kilt, and I said, well, you got to start somewhere. Why not? That's rather fetching. I was being interviewed by a German journalist once after I'd won a literary prize there, and they interviewed me for a week every half hour, so I was sort of cross-eyed at the time. But he was carrying on about my books, and he was saying, I've read all your books. They're tremendous. Their characters are they're so magic, your narrative is marvelous, and so on. I'm going, yes, go on. And instead, he stopped and said, I wonder, can you tell me, what is the appeal of a man in a kilt? And I was really tired, or I might not have said it, but I looked at him for a minute, and I said, well, I suppose it's the idea that you could be up against a wall with him in a minute. So not surprisingly, my first scene involved the man in a kilt who had no name at that point.
That is a perfect place to finish, but I will take these final 2 questions. So there's somebody there and somebody over there. Yes, you first, yeah.
You mentioned studying the map of Philadelphia in the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
When you're writing your new guide to Outlander, I would love to have some maps in it because
Yes.
I visit that area a lot, having a son there. And perhaps you will get Peter to tell you the full joke that ends in, no, it's all in good working order, sometime in private.
I've heard that one, yes.
I'm from England, I don't know that.
Yes, though, yes, though
Okay,
your wife's lipstick is probably a better tagline. Yeah. Yes, there will be maps in the new guide, as well as floor plans of Fraser's Ridge and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Final question, wherever you are. There
I
you
was
are.
just wondering, has an actor been cast for Roger in the TV series?
No, they haven't. Yeah, no, neither for Roger nor Brianna.
Not small Roger in the...
Oh, no, small Roger's in there. You will, in fact, see him, but not till a later episode. Yeah. But, the adult Roger has not been cast, nor has Brianna. They better get a move on if they're going to get into a second season. But I'm told that it probably won't begin filming until sometime in the spring, so they've got a bit of lead time. Yeah.
Okay, we are out of time. Before I ask you to thank Diana, can I just say that she's going to be signing copies of the books in the bookshop behind you. She will sign your name, but she won't have time to do inscriptions because we're guessing there'll be quite a long queue. But she's going to be doing that in a minute. If I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry, but I'm sure she'll be happy to answer that question individually in there. Yeah. Thank you for being such a terrific audience, but will you please thank our guests for a fantastic time?
Well, it's absolutely amazing, and I was saying to my friend that we came here today and it was like we were here yesterday and it was last year. It's just exactly the same. It's absolutely fantastic. Lovely, lovely atmosphere. Diana Gabaldon, she was absolutely jaw-dropping. She managed to get 100 words in every single second, and everything she said was interesting. It was really, really very, very nice to meet her and listen to her. I think just seeing her and how youthful she is and how absolutely magical she is and how lovely that she concentrated on Scotland. Very nice, yeah.
Love it. It's one of my favourite things in August. I'm not originally from here, so I make it a point of coming to it. So yeah, love it. Just very engaging and really lovely, and I just hope that the TV series comes to the UK very soon because I'm a big fan of hers.
Diana's event was absolutely amazing. She's a very funny lady. She has you in stitches, gives you a lot of information about the books, and it was a really good talk.
She is very funny, and that's what we love about her. When she tells you the background of the stories that she's come up with, it makes a lot of sense to us, the readers, and we're very big fans, and we've read all her books, so it's nice to get a little insight into what's going on in her stories.
It gives a new meaning to the story, to the actual stories when you find out where the background has come from. So that finding out the background is probably the highlight of the event.
I think meeting her as well, it's a great honour to meet someone who's been writing these stories for so long. I'm quite new to all of her books, and it just keeps it fresh to see her, to see that she's so passionate about it, because as readers we've become very passionate with the characters in the story.
Our group is called Outlander UK. It's a Facebook group where there's about 700 members now. And basically it's everyone that's interested in Diana's stories and the TV programme that's being made. And we get together, we chat, we have local meetups in Edinburgh, Glasgow, and groups that are going on down south.
We share stories.
Yeah, we had a huge gathering in Edinburgh in May. We're planning another one for next year. We were extremely lucky last night that a lot of the members of the group, I think about 100 members, were invited to a dinner with Diana last night, and that was an amazing experience, and it's a really, really friendly group.
Yeah. We have a lot of fun. We get together, we tell stories, we talk about how we feel about characters and how they're evolving in the stories, what we like and what we don't like, and even about the filming of the TV programme being made here in Glasgow. I'm actually from Cumbernauld, where they've filmed some of the scenes, so it's been quite exciting to share the stories of what's going on. It's been fantastic. So it's a great group, and you should check it out.